He was barely hanging on, shivering in a truck with a broken heater, his dog the only warmth he had left in a winter far colder than his life. When he bought an abandoned electric bus, everyone called the crazy bus. People laughed and said he'd freeze by morning. But that night, the bus lit up on its own, warm, steady, alive. And those who stepped inside, they never looked at winter the same again. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support truly means the world to us. The wind slid cold and sharp across Bozeman, Montana, where snow fell like powdered glass over sleeping streets. Elias Ward stirred beneath a bundle of mismatched blankets in the back seat of a stalled-out pickup truck. The glass was frosted from the inside. His breath fogged the air, but he didn't rush to move. Some mornings it felt easier to stay still, to let the silence press against him like the weight of old snow. He blinked slowly. The creases around his eyes deepened from years of squinting into desert sun, and now squinting into memory. Elias was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with a worn, leathered look to his skin and a jagged scar near his right temple, a souvenir from his second tour overseas. His jaw was strong, now hidden behind a scruff of gray-shot beard, and his once messy brown hair had dulled into a darker ash. 3 years ago, he'd had a wife who made fun of how often he left crumbs on the counter, and a daughter who used to climb him like a tree. Then came the black ice, the wrong turn, and the single phone call that made his silence permanent. A faint rustling beside him broke through the ache. Ranger, his 4-year-old German shepherd, stretched and yawned, steam curling from his muzzle. The dog was large and lean, with a thick coat of black and white fur and amber eyes that always seemed too knowing. Loyal to the bone, Ranger had refused to leave Elias's side even when the house was gone, even when the truck became their shelter, even when the heater died. Now he nudged Elias's hand gently, his tail sweeping the icy floor like a silent metronome. "Yeah," Elias muttered hoarsely. "Still here. That's something." He sat up slowly, joints popping like worn floorboards. The truck was quiet. Too quiet. The heater had given out 2 nights ago, and the cold had crept in like grief, patient and thorough. He looked through the windshield at the snow outside. White blanketed the world. Cars parked haphazardly, footprints already vanishing. The kind of morning where people held their coats tighter and looked straight ahead. Elias used to be one of them. Now he watched the world through fogged windows and pretended it didn't sting. They walked to the only corner store in the neighborhood that didn't question him pouring hot water over his own tea bags. On the community board near the exit, a neon orange flyer flapped in the wind, barely pinned. "City surplus auction, vehicles and equipment, Saturday, includes crazy bus." Ranger's ears perked. He sniffed the paper, then sneezed once like a verdict. "Not interested," Elias muttered, pocketing his tea. But as they walked back to the truck, the words crazy bus gnawed at the edge of his mind. It was just a name, probably a joke. But people didn't slap the word crazy on a bus for no reason. By Friday, the tea had run out. The last can of chili had gone cold before he could warm it. Ranger had spent the night curled up around Elias's boots, growling softly whenever the wind howled. Sleep didn't come easy, not when memories were louder than blizzards. He thought of Sarah's hands, pale and freckled, of Lily's drawings on the fridge, of how he'd stopped talking to God because God had stopped answering. The auction lot was held in the cracked remains of an old municipal parking yard. Rusted snowplows lined one edge. Retired utility vans sat like old horses in a field. The smell of oil and forgotten things hung in the air. Elias wasn't there to buy. He told himself that. But something, maybe Ranger's unblinking attention, maybe the silence, pulled him forward. There it was. At the far end of the lot, tucked behind 2 ambulances, sat a long silver-blue electric bus. Its windows were dusted with frost. The paint along the edges was chipped, but the body looked intact, almost proud in a tired kind of way. A laminated card was zip-tied to its side mirror. Transit Shelter Bus Model. Echo condition, unknown locals call it the Crazy Bus. Status, not connected to grid. Operational history, none recorded. Elias tilted his head. No grid, no records, no takers. Ranger stepped closer, tail low but steady. He sniffed the tires, the frame, the frozen entry step, and then he sat. Just sat, staring up at the bus like it was waiting for them. "You're joking," Elias said flatly. Ranger barked once, quiet but certain. He glanced around. No one was paying attention. Most bidders were gathered near a fire truck with 3 missing wheels. He shouldn't. It was insane. He had no business adding more dead metal to his life. But something in the stillness of that bus, the way it refused to look broken, the way it held its frost-like dignity, felt familiar. He stepped forward and rested his hand on the cold frame. It was warm, just barely, but undeniably. Ranger pressed his side against Elias's boot. "Don't make me regret this," Elias muttered. He raised his hand when the bidding opened. No one else bid. The city surplus yard was quiet under a blanket of old snow, the kind that no longer sparkled but clung to the ground like forgotten ash. Elias Ward adjusted the frayed collar of his jacket and walked deeper into the lot, Ranger trotting beside him, every step precise, ears perked. The vehicles here were like ghosts, snowplows with cracked windshields, ambulances stripped of sirens, and faded city buses retired from routes no one remembered. But one vehicle stood apart. Tucked between 2 rusted utility vans was a long, silver-blue electric bus. It might have once been sleek, modern, even proud, but now it was covered in a thick coat of grime. The logo across its side had been partially scraped off, clean lines marred as though someone had taken great care to obscure its origin. Along the passenger doors, frost clung despite the relative warmth of the morning. The glass trembled faintly, not from wind, but something subtler, like a breath held just beneath the surface. A laminated sign hung from a rearview mirror by a plastic tie. The paper had yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. Transit Shelter Bus Model. Unknown manufacturer. Data erased condition. Unverified note. Electrical anomalies reported. Use caution. Ranger sniffed the front tire, circled once, then sat directly beneath the side mirror, watching Elias with focused, unblinking eyes. A man walked over, wiping his hands on a clipboard. He looked to be in his late 50s, stocky and red-faced, with wind-chapped cheeks and a thick gray mustache. His orange safety vest clung awkwardly over a puffy blue parka. This was Roy Hendricks, the auction lot manager, a man who'd worked here for over 30 years and had seen everything from fire trucks to decommissioned tanks pass through his gates. "Don't know why you're looking at that one," Roy grunted, nodding toward the bus. "Locals call it the Crazy Bus. Thing's been sitting back there 6 months. Every time we try to pull it inside, battery lights up like Christmas. But it ain't plugged in. No cables. No charging port that makes sense. Techs from the city gave up." Elias raised a brow. "You ever open it?" Roy shook his head. "Couple guys did. Said the inside was off. Said it was warm even when it shouldn't be. No central heater. No power line. Said it hummed. One of 'em swore the lights flickered like it was breathing. After that, nobody wanted to touch it. It ain't worth the paperwork." The man snorted and turned away. "You want it? I'll give it to you for near nothing. Just sign the waiver so the city's not liable." Elias watched the bus a long moment. Something about the way it sat there, still and silent, like it had been waiting, not just for a buyer, but for him. It wasn't logical. It wasn't even sane. But logic hadn't helped him survive the last 3 years. Ranger barked once, low and sharp. He stepped closer. The surface of the metal was cold to the touch, but not frozen. His fingers brushed a faint dent near the front, as if someone had once tried to pry the panel open. A low, almost imperceptible hum vibrated beneath the skin of the bus. "Fine," Elias said, barely above a whisper. "I'll take it." The purchase process took 10 minutes. Roy handed over the papers like passing off a cursed object, then quickly turned back to his coffee. Elias climbed the steps into the bus. The doors hissed slightly, but didn't resist. Inside, the air felt alive. Not warm exactly, but not cold. Not mechanical either. Just present. Rows of faded seats lined the bus, clean but untouched. The lights overhead pulsed faintly in soft blue, like the slow rhythm of breath in deep sleep. He ran his hand along the rail. No dust, no grime. Someone, or something, had kept it clean. Then he felt it. That strange, unmistakable pressure, like being watched. But when he turned, there was nothing but Ranger, waiting at the doorway, amber eyes steady, tail still. Elias exhaled slowly and sat on the driver's seat, feeling the slight give of the worn cushion. A panel blinked once on the dashboard. No key in the ignition, no cable connection. But still, a pulse. He didn't know why, but he whispered, "You really are crazy, aren't you?" And somewhere deep in the chassis, something clicked. The late afternoon sky over Bozeman was pale and muted, snow clouds drifting silently above like forgotten memories. Inside the bus, Elias sat at the wheel, staring at the dashboard that blinked to life without prompt. The lights were faint but steady, casting a surreal calm across the interior. He exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel cold. Ranger lay sprawled behind him in the aisle, but his ears twitched, alert. Elias turned his head. The bus wasn't just warm. It felt responsive, almost breathing. The temperature remained oddly stable, even as the wind howled outside. There was no heater, no power lines, no generator. And yet, it was as if the vehicle wanted him there, like it remembered its purpose. Ranger stood up suddenly, nose in the air. He gave a short grunt and padded to the back of the bus. His black and white coat shimmered in the bus's ambient light, and his amber eyes were focused. Elias watched in silence as Ranger began to sniff the floor with growing intensity. Then the dog scratched, first once, then again, at a panel beneath the last row of seats. A low whine escaped his throat as he pressed his nose to a seam so thin it was nearly invisible. Elias knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Ranger gave a short bark and nudged the panel with his snout. It clicked, just barely, like a pressure switch releasing. Elias's heart quickened. He slipped his fingers under the edge and pulled gently. A hidden compartment lifted open with a hiss of released air. Beneath it was a smooth metal hatch, sealed with a reinforced lock that looked military-grade. The words stenciled onto it were still intact, despite the grime. Property of Aegis Technologies. Emergency use only. Inside the hatch was a compact storage bay, no bigger than a trunk, but pristine. Within it, secured with industrial clamps, lay a sealed metal box the size of a microwave, its corners rounded, its surface slightly glowing with a low internal heat. Attached to the top was a waterproof packet of documents. Elias pulled it free and unfolded the top page. The header read, "Project Thermos, Heat Cascade Core, Prototype. For use in catastrophic cold events only. Production terminated due to unknown safety risks." He sat back on his heels. A shelter bus. Not just any bus, but a prototype model designed for disaster zones embedded with tech never meant for public release. No wonder the lights breathed. No wonder the vehicle stayed warm. The system inside was still alive. The documents included a diagnostic log. The last entry was dated 3 years ago and mentioned a successful core activation test, followed by immediate project suspension. There were no follow-ups. Elias looked at Ranger, who now sat beside the open hatch, tail still, gaze fixed on Elias as if waiting for something more than praise. And in that moment, Elias understood. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't luck. Ranger had found this. He had brought them here, not just to a warm place to survive, but to something hidden, something forgotten that could still serve a purpose, just like Elias himself. Snow drifted in slow spirals across the empty streets of Bozeman, softening the world into silence. The electric bus sat quietly in a lot behind the old post office, its dusty silver-blue frame barely visible beneath a thin crust of ice. But inside, the warmth still pulsed, soft and steady, like a heartbeat beneath steel. Elias stood near the back, arms folded across his chest, watching as Ranger sat near the door, ears perked, tail curled neatly, eyes alert. The German shepherd had become more than a companion. He was a sentinel. Since discovering the hidden tech core, Elias had sensed the bus was more than metal and wiring. It was responding to people, reacting to emotion, need, and maybe even pain. The first to knock on the bus door was Fred Nolan, a wiry old man in his late 60s with a scraggly gray beard and oil-stained hands that shook from more than just the cold. Once a diesel mechanic, Fred had worked on trucks until arthritis and age pushed him to the streets. His breath fogged in the air as he coughed and asked, "You got heat in there, Marine?" Elias hesitated only a moment before nodding and gesturing him inside. Then came Clara Yu, a 22-year-old engineering student at the local college. She was tall and thin, with long black hair, always tied in a messy bun, wire-framed glasses perched on her narrow nose, and the quiet intensity of someone who thought deeply before speaking. Her dorm's heating had failed during the storm, and she'd been sleeping in the library until it closed. When she heard rumors about a strange bus that stayed warm without power, she followed the whispers and found Elias's lot. Maya Hernandez arrived last. She was a petite woman in her late 30s with curly dark hair, caramel skin, and a bright green store apron still tied around her waist. For the past 3 nights, she'd been quietly leaving sandwiches and thermal blankets outside the bus, never knocking, never speaking. When Elias opened the door this time and called out to her, she froze, unsure whether to run or reply. But Ranger padded forward, nudged her gloved hand with his nose, and just like that, she stepped inside. Within minutes, the interior felt different. The lights grew a shade warmer, not in color, but in presence, as if reacting to the gathering of bodies and breath. The temperature rose by a few degrees, subtle but distinct. Elias said nothing, but he saw it, how the system responded not to switches or controls, but to life. Fred sat huddled in the corner with his coat open for the first time in weeks. Clara examined the walls and vents, whispering about radiant transfer systems and microheating arrays no one should have been able to afford. Maya passed out small cups of soup from a thermos she carried. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the crazy bus, the cold was a rumor that no longer mattered. Elias noticed the lights along the ceiling flicker once, soft, rhythmic, not mechanical, like breathing. No one else seemed to notice. Ranger did. His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing with that curious canine stillness that spoke of instinct, not understanding. By nightfall, word had spread. More knocks came. Elias turned some away when the bus reached its safe limit. But still, they came. And somehow, the crazy bus always knew how to cradle its own. Warmth where there should be none. Comfort where there should be cold. The snow had melted slightly under the weak midday sun, revealing patches of slush on the backlot pavement where the crazy bus rested like a sleeping creature. Inside, the air remained warm, faintly humming. The people who had come for shelter still huddled quietly under wool blankets, and Ranger lay near the front door, with his chin on his paws, watching the street like a soldier on silent guard. The city inspector arrived just after lunch. Liam Carter was in his early 40s, lean and sharp-featured, with sandy hair slicked neatly back and a faint scar slicing down one cheekbone. A leftover from a scaffold collapse years ago that changed him from a field foreman into a man of protocol and procedure. Dressed in a dark gray parka and steel-toe boots, Liam had the careful clinical air of someone who measured the world in specs and tolerances. He stepped out of the city truck holding a clipboard, already frowning before he even reached the vehicle. Elias emerged from the bus slowly, jaw tight, shoulders squared. He didn't trust city men, not anymore. Too many of them acted like paperwork mattered more than people. "Can I help you?" he asked flatly. Liam squinted up at the bus. "Got a call about an unregistered electric vehicle pulling grid power without a permit. That yours?" "It's not pulling grid power," Elias said, crossing his arms. "It doesn't need to." That earned a raised brow. "You expect me to believe this thing heats itself in the dead of Montana winter without a power source?" "You can check it yourself," Elias said, stepping aside. Inside, Liam expected a mess, a tangled web of illegal wiring, or maybe some hidden gas heater humming beneath the floor. Instead, he found something else entirely. He stepped past Ranger with caution, noting the dog's intense amber eyes and the perfect stillness of his stance. Liam bent down beside the rear bench where Clara had once tinkered and removed the panel Elias pointed out. What he found made his breath catch. The battery unit wasn't just large, it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The core hummed gently, faintly glowing with a pale gold light. The internal panels were balanced by a set of thermal stabilizers unlike any standard model. The wiring wasn't patchwork, it was seamless, elegant, and layered with design principles he had only seen in concept schematics. Liam crouched for a long moment, eyes narrowing. He muttered, "Self-rebalancing, dual-phase isolation layers, and this—" He touched the insulation. "That's aerogel. This whole thing is experimental." When he rose, Elias was watching him closely. "You recognize it?" Liam exhaled, rubbing his face. 10 years ago, I worked with a defense contractor trying to build mobile disaster relief units, buses that could house and heat 20 people off-grid, but it was scrapped. Too expensive, too unstable. The prototypes were dismantled. Or so we were told. He looked around again, the humming warmth, the subtle light, the people sleeping soundly, the dog watching like a sentinel. "This shouldn't exist. It's a lost prototype. Someone must have dumped it at auction." "You gonna report it?" Elias asked, his voice hard. Liam hesitated. Then he looked once more at Fred, curled under a blanket, at Maya quietly passing out warm water from a thermos, and at Clara half asleep, with a soldering pen still in hand. "No," Liam said finally. "No, I'm not." He met Elias's eyes. "But you should know, once word spreads, someone will come looking. This isn't just an old vehicle. It's tech years ahead of anything on the market." Elias nodded, jaw tightening. "Then we'll keep it quiet, until they force us." Liam gave a grim smile. "I can help you keep it running, but this thing, it's bigger than both of us now." Ranger let out a soft huff, as if in agreement. The snow began before dawn, light and scattered like powdered sugar. But by noon, the world had vanished beneath a white curtain, and by dusk, Bozeman was buried. Power lines collapsed under the weight of ice, traffic lights blinked out, and the city fell into a hush broken only by wind, howling through frozen gutters. The crazy bus remained, glowing like a strange lantern in the storm. It was Leah Morris who came knocking on Elias's window, wrapped in a reflective emergency parka and thick green scarf, her brown eyes sharp despite the sting of cold. Leah was in her 30s, with tightly curled black hair tucked under her hood and a lean, purposeful stride. As a community response officer, she was one of the few city workers still moving through the whiteout. Her voice was hoarse with urgency as she shouted over the wind, "Elias, we need to move people. The shelters are out of power. Seniors, newborns, no way to get to them." Elias hesitated for a breath, looking at the swirling snow, and then at Ranger, who was already standing near the door, tail still, ears forward. Elias nodded. "We'll go." The crazy bus started without complaint. Its engine gave off a soft, sustained hum that grew deeper as the wheels turned through thick snowbanks. The lights inside grew brighter, warmer, casting soft halos through the frosted windows. It moved not like a machine, but like something sentient, adapting itself to the cold, navigating ice without slipping, humming a tone that somehow calmed the nerves of everyone on board. Their first stop was an apartment block darkened by the outage. On the third floor, a young mother named Ana Delgado clutched her newborn daughter against her chest, wrapped in 3 layers of towels. Ana was small and pale, with long dark hair stuck to her temples with sweat, her lips blue from cold. Her baby barely stirred. Elias lifted them both gently into the bus, while Leah worked fast to check their pulse. Ranger remained by the doorway, watching, not barking, just present. Next was the old city bus station where 5 elderly men and women sat huddled together. One of them, Mr. Hobbs, wore only a flannel shirt and pajama pants. His wrinkled fingers trembled uncontrollably. Maya, who'd once left food at the bus door, joined them from the back of the crazy bus and helped serve warm broth from a portable heater. Elias didn't ask where she got it. Then came 2 sanitation workers, both men in orange jumpsuits soaked through with snow and exhaustion. One, a tall man with olive skin and a thick beard named Marcus, had collapsed on the sidewalk. Ranger barked once, sharp and urgent, ears pointed toward the shadows. Elias followed his gaze and found them both half buried behind a dumpster, barely conscious. He dragged them into the bus himself, one over each shoulder. Each time someone new entered, the temperature inside rose slightly. Not mechanically, but instinctively, like the bus felt their need. The interior lights shifted with each breath, each cry, pulsing faintly as if breathing with them. Ranger stood at the door for every arrival, sometimes tilting his head, sometimes stepping back to make room, always watching with eyes that missed nothing. By midnight, the bus had rescued over 20 people. Parked in the center of a snowy intersection, with wind blasting outside and the city blacked out around them, the crazy bus pulsed with life. Inside, the rescued slept, children clung to mothers, old men leaned on each other, and in the driver's seat, Elias watched over them with eyes no longer haunted, just steady. And by his side, Ranger rested his head on Elias's boot, a silent sentinel in the heart of the storm. Sunlight spilled over the snowbanks like gold dust, turning the frozen streets of Bozeman into a sparkling mosaic of white and amber. The storm had passed. The silence left behind was not hollow, but full, like the moment after a prayer. News traveled quickly. In less than 24 hours, local radio, social media, and neighborhood forums were buzzing about the bus that glowed through the night and saved dozens from the deadly cold. The town called it a miracle. Some called it magic. But for Elias Ward, it was just something that finally made sense. At City Hall, in a modest press room flanked by snow-covered windows, Elias stood beside Liam Carter and Leah Morris. Liam, still in his city-issued coat, had a neatly combed head of ash-brown hair and an engineer's precise posture. He spoke first, his voice clear. "We've completed our investigation, and we're not seizing the bus." A collective breath was held in the room. Instead, the city is launching a pilot program, Shelter Bus Project, and we're asking Elias to lead it. Elias didn't answer at first. His beard had grown slightly since the blizzard, and though his eyes were tired, there was a new steadiness in them. He glanced down at Ranger, who sat faithfully at his side, ears relaxed, tail swaying once. Then Elias looked up and said simply, "All right?" Leia smiled, stepping forward. Her scarf was a new one, hand-knit, gifted by one of the grandmothers from the bus. "Also," she said, holding out a small manila envelope, "there's a unit available in Willow Creek Housing. 1 bedroom, clean, warm. It's yours. No strings." Elias took the envelope slowly, as if it might vanish. His fingers trembled just slightly, then closed around it. Weeks passed. The city worked fast. With help from the university's engineering department and quiet consulting from Liam, a new version of the shelter bus was built. This time, it bore the city's seal. It had newer wiring, advanced insulation, safety overrides. But on its side, stenciled in bold Navy letters, was a single line of tribute, inspired by a Marine, his German Shepherd, and a crazy electric bus that saved a winter. At the unveiling, dozens gathered under a blue spring sky. Clara from the dormitory stood with Fred, who no longer coughed from the cold. Maya handed out warm pastries. Ana Delgado held her now chubby baby girl, bundled in pink fleece, and Elias stood with his hand on the smooth, gleaming side of the new shelter bus. He wore a clean red and black flannel under a light city parka. His face was lined, but alive. Ranger leaned gently against his leg, tail still, eyes watching the bus. And then, just as the crowd quieted, the bus let out a faint mechanical thrum, not unlike a sigh. Elias chuckled softly. "Guess it approves." Sometimes God sends miracles not with thunder, but through an old bus, a loyal dog, and a broken man who still dared to care. In your own life, look for light in unexpected places. It might just be your turn. If this story touched your heart, please share, comment, and subscribe. May God bless you and keep you warm this winter.